let's go ahead and get started. So agenda for today, we're going to start, as we always do, with the gaps. So what are the current gaps in Business Central? What are the things that you aren't able to do today that we are going to help build a solution for? We're going to go into what those solutions look like directly embedded into Business Central with our expense sheet solution. Then I'm going to hop over to Carlie. She's going to do a live demo for us today of expense sheets. So she's going to be going through everything start to finish, a few of the setup things, as well as how a user would use this application on a day-to-day basis. That's going to be very useful if you're an end user joining us, which I see a lot of you are, as well as if you're a partner recommending this to your clients or helping them implement expense sheets. Then we'll go over what the next steps are. As you all know who've been here before, we do 30-day free trials on all of our applications. So we'll get into how you can enable those, the resources, what you need to be successful after the call. And then again, we put Q&A at the end, but I highly encourage anybody who has questions to ask them throughout the presentation in the chat, and we'll attempt to answer those as we go. So let's start with the gaps. One of the first gaps that we have in Business Central is there's not a great way to track personal card expenses that we need to reimburse or corporate expenses in Business Central, right? There's no way to then send these for workflow approval, get your manager to approve them, that those expenses are legitimate and they can be reimbursed or booked the company credit card. Don't have a way really to import any of these credit card feeds, either from the corporate standpoint or your personal standpoint, and attach documents. And there's not a way to go ahead and just automatically bill these expenses back to customers or projects associated to customers. Of course, we have a solution, which is why we're here today. So what those solutions look like in Business Central from our expense sheet standpoint, first and foremost, is that employees are able to enter their own expenses directly in Business Central. Now, typically that's going to be for reimbursable expenses that they've gone out, traveled, flights, Ubers, all that kind of stuff. Personal card, they need to submit it. Manager needs to approve it, and then company needs to reimburse them. Now we can do that from an employee vendor standpoint, all within Business Central. Other piece is going to be those corporate card expenses, right? Employees have corporate cards, they're swiping the card. They don't necessarily need to pay that off themselves. The company's going to pay it for them, but the company still requires that the users go and tag their own expenses and upload their own receipts and images and whatever other supporting document they need in order to do so. We've also got expense categories, which are easy to use flags, basically, or tags that you can put on expenses that are then behind the scenes linked to GL accounts. So your users don't need to know that it's expense account 60300, right? They can just tag airfare, and behind the scenes, all the magic is happening from your financial standpoint, right? Already talked about receipts. So of course you're going to be able to do that. Talked about the expense types. Approvals going to be a big piece of this, right? It's not just automatically going to magically get paid or magically get approved. Somebody has to look at that. We can toggle this on and off, of course. And then finally, the ability to link projects and customers to bill those expenses back. And we can do that through our project management tool that we've created here. So with that, most of you know I don't like PowerPoints that much, so we'll spend just a little bit of time in there. Carlie's going to jump into the live demo. Carlie, I'll monitor that chat if anybody has any questions, and we look forward to showing you the live demo here in a second. Confirming I can see your screen, Carlie, you're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Alrighty, getting started here. I'm going to start really quick at the expense sheet setup, just to touch on a few things here. So one being the expenses require approval. I do have that turned off just for the sake of the demo, so we can kind of get through everything beginning to end, but I will still show how and where you set that up. Okay, so that's turned off. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quick is what Ben just mentioned about our expense sheets tool does work with our project management solution really nicely as well. You don't have to use it together, but you can. And so towards the end of the demo, I'll show you the ways that those two extensions are connected. And if you do plan to use project management and expense sheets, you'll pick your project dimension here that you're using with our PMS solution, project management. Okay, so I do have projects installed and projects are set up for Global 3, so that's where I have it set up here. Okay, so those are just a few important things. Okay, real quick, again, on my user setup, this is going to be your setup for any user that is going to be submitting expenses, approving expenses, maybe their expense admin. Okay, so really everyone needs to be set up here. There are a few checkboxes. So I have an expense admin. That's kind of a super user for all expenses. Someone, if they can approve expenses, expense AR user and an expense AP user. I'm going to hold off and I'll explain what these are once we get a little bit further into the demo. It'll make a little bit more sense. And then lastly, can access all employee cards. And so this is employee credit cards. Okay, and I'll show this here as well next. Okay. We're going to go and we're going to go to our employee list. So any user submitting expenses inside of Business Central needs to be set up as an employee. So here I have myself set up as an employee. I'm going to come down here and we added a couple fields, expense sheet approver. So again, I do have this turned off just for the demo, but mine is set up to Ben. So each person has one approver that they can be set up to, and then expense sheet vendor. And so if I'm an employee and I'm submitting expenses from my personal card, and I expect to get reimbursed through those, it's going to create a purchase invoice to this vendor, okay? So the employees have to be set up as a vendor here, and that's where we link it. If I'm an employee and I also have a credit card that I want to submit my expenses for as well, they're not reimbursable. However, we want to make sure they get tagged and uploaded to Business Central. Here I can create my employee credit cards. I can have more than one, as many as you need. And then you're linking the account type over here. You can link a GL account, or more often than not, you can also link a bank account if you have it set up for reconciliation purposes. Okay, and then default is if you have multiple, which credit card do you want to default in when you're creating those expenses? Okay, next here, we're going to go to expense types. And so those are when I'm creating my expenses, what are they getting tagged to, right? So cell phone, flights, internet, etc. I then can tag it to an expense account and a revenue account if they are billable back to a customer, okay? I happen to have them all linked to the same expense and revenue accounts, but you can link them to whatever accounts you needed. Billing markup percent is if they are billable, do we assign a markup to the amount? So flights, if it's billable back to a customer, it's going to assign a 10% markup. Copy attachments to sales and purchase docs. So if we are adding receipts, which you can see that requirement over here, if we're adding those to our expenses and then we go around and bill it to our customer because it's billable, do we want to attach the receipt that was added to the expense to the customer's invoice? And then same thing for the purchase doc. If we're reimbursing the employee, when we create that purchase invoice to reimburse them, do we want to attach the receipt that they attached? Okay, so those are those flags here. All right, we're going to jump right into creating an expense now. You can see that's really all the setup there is. So very straightforward and a quick and nice setup there. I have my expense sheets here. We also have a page called All Expense Sheets. Now, this was one of the checkboxes on the user setup that you have to have access to this page in order to see it. Okay, so if you were, an expense admin and you're able to see everyone's expenses and kind of the status, you would have access to this page. Otherwise, you would only have access to my expense sheet page. Okay, so if I come here to my expense sheets, we're going to create a new one here. Okay, so I have expense sheet number, employee number will default to your own user, okay? And then employee status or employee name, the status of the expense sheet. So it's open, then it would go to pending approval, and then it will go to completed once it has been approved. The vendor number for this employee when we reimburse them, and then the reimbursed status of this expense sheet, which is not reimbursed. We haven't submitted anything yet, okay? I'm going to come down here and create an expense. So we'll grab, we'll do internet here, and I'll do another one for cell phone. July. Okay, these are reimbursable. Now here, projects code. Okay, so this is a piece of, if you're using our project management solution, this is important here. So what I can do is this is a drop-down list of all my projects. okay, using our project management solution, I'm going to tie this to project 6, okay? As you can see, as soon as I did this, it also populated the customer and that it was billable, okay? It doesn't have to be tied to a project, so if you're not using that solution, you can just select the customer right here, and then it'll also be marked as billable, okay? If it's not billable, you're not going to be selecting a customer. I'm going to do both of these to that project so we can see how that flows through. Okay, I'm going to enter these as personal. So these were expenses that hit my personal card. The other option, which we can do together as well, will be a credit card expense, and we can see how we can import those in as well. Okay, so I created 2 expenses from my personal card here, and now I'm going to submit my expense sheet. And we're going to say yes. Okay, you can see that the status was approved only because I do have those approvals turned off. Otherwise, it would have gone to pending approval. Okay, real quick, I want to create another expense sheet, and we're going to do credit card this time. So I'm going to create a new one. You can mix and match one expense sheet with personal and credit card as well. So I can add, 3 personal lines and then add my credit card lines as well into the same expense sheet, and it'll work appropriately. We also created a CSV and Excel import for those credit card or even personal expenses, if that's how you want to import them. Mine set up for credit cards. So if I come here and do import expense sheet, it's going to ask me to grab a file. I have this expense credit card import here. We created a standard template, so it would of course need to be tweaked if you have a template yourself already, or the credit card file that you're getting from your provider, is a specific layout, we can absolutely match that, but this is kind of the standard template that we have right now. Okay, so you can see those credit card charges got imported in here. My payment type defaulted to credit card over here. And then since my credit card file didn't have the expense type listed, I have to come in here and select those. Okay, and so that's why it's not populated there for me. So I can do that. And I'll just do a couple for now and delete the rest. Okay, so I have my 2 credit cards. Charges here, my payment type is credit card. Next here is I'm picking which credit card am I tying this expense to. And so if you remember, if I'm going to select this one, and if I open this back up, right, this is how we know what is the credit card liability account tied to this credit card. So when we post this expense, it'll actually hit your GL with this account here, your credit card liability, and then whatever expense account is tied to internet. Right. And then the same thing for, this line, it's going to grab the credit card liability and then whatever expense is tied to miscellaneous here. Okay. So for my credit cards, I'm leaving these as billable off, and they are not reimbursable either to the employee, since it was through their credit card, we're not reimbursing. Okay. So there's how the imports work, and as well as credit cards over here, I can now submit expense sheet. Okay. And it follows the same process. Alrighty, so next I'm going to go to a page called Expense AR List, okay? And so Expense AR List is going to show all expenses, and if I come over here, that are billable, okay? And so these are expenses that need to be billed back to a customer. So when I'm on my expense sheet and I tied it, in our example, to a project that was tied to a customer, it automatically flagged it as billable. And so we know that we need to generate a sales invoice to the customer for this expense. Okay, so what I can do here is I can see the status. So status here is approved for all these expenses. Billing status, okay, so that means that we have, for collected, it means we billed the customer and they have also paid us for it. Okay, pending cash receipt means that we've generated the sales invoice, we've posted it, but we're waiting on that payment from our customer. Added to sales invoice is straightforward. It just means it's been added to a sales invoice. However, we have not posted it yet. And if I look over here, you can actually see which sales invoices they've been added to and if there's a posted sales invoice associated. So for these 2 here, I can see that, oh, I actually need to go and post that sales invoice. It's still outstanding. Okay. And then lastly, these last two are the ones we just did together. And so these were my two personal that were billable, because if you remember my credit card expenses, I did not flag as billable. So these last two are show as not billed. However, we do need to bill them. So what I can do is I can select these two here, and I'm going to say generate sales invoice. Now you can do it for all of these at once, okay? So you could select all of the expenses that are not billed for, as many different customers, and it will appropriately create the sales invoices. And then, for example, these two expenses are for the same customer. It'll put them on the one invoice rather than separate invoices, okay? So I'm going to say generate sales invoice. Selected expenses have generated sales invoices. I can come over here and see that as well over here. And you can see that it added to this sales invoice that we previously created, okay? Because it was for the same customer and I hadn't posted these yet, okay? So if I come to sales invoices, okay, I can come down here and see that it added all of my expenses that were billable to this customer here, okay? This top one didn't have a description on my expense sheet, so I'm just gonna enter one, expense for XYZ, okay? And these are the expenses, the expense account that is tied to my expense type for each of these. Now I can post. And once this posts, we're going to go back to my expense AR list here where we just were. And you can see now these are also pending cash receipt. Okay. And so, the next process is wait for your customer to pay it through or record payment through the cash receipt journal. And then it'll move to a status of collected, which is what this first one is. Okay. Now let's talk about reimbursed status. Okay. And so this top line here shows, okay, we've collected it from the customer, but what's reimbursed status? It shows as paid. Well, this one is saying that this one was reimbursable to our employee and we have paid our employee for it as well. So you can see all of that from one page. We also have a separate page called expense AP list. This is where you're going to be generating the purchase invoices for your employees for their expenses if they are reimbursable. Okay, so these last two here are what we did together, and they show as pending cash receipt. So again, that's what we just looked at on the expense AR list. This is like the customer status. So we can see that we billed the customer, but we're just waiting on payment from them for the expense. But then the reimbursed status here shows that we have not generated the purchase invoice for our employee. So what I can do is really the same process here on this side. I can, grab all the ones that are not reimbursed here and say generate purchase invoice. Before I do so, you can also see where over here, we have the same field. So you can see which purchase invoice it was originally added to, and then what was the posted purchase invoice number once you posted it as well, okay? So I'm going to say generate purchase invoice. Okay, once I do that, you can see that these were just added to this purchase invoice. I can come here. Okay, look, see this information. It all came in correctly. It's for my expense sheet employee that I tied that employee to, and now I can post. Okay, now once I come back here, again, we can see that now it shows as pending payment. Okay, so we have not yet paid our employee for this purchase invoice. Next steps would be to go to the payment journal, which we can do together. And you can use, suggest vendor payments since they are just set up as a vendor here. You can use suggest vendor payments and it'll come in along with all of your other vendors. A good idea could be to, if you're using our tool, to create a vendor posting group called employee. So that way, when you do suggest vendor payments, if you just want to pay your employees, you can create a filter based on that posting group. So say, hey, I just want to suggest vendor payments for only my employees. That way you can kind of filter to them directly. Okay. I'm going to come in here. I know I'm just paying my expense sheet employee here. And let's apply entries. And I will apply to these here. Okay, post. And now we're going to go back to our expense AP list, and it shows as paid. Okay. And then again, it shows my purchase invoice and posted purchase invoice number over here. Okay. Just stop and click to make sure if we have any questions.
Yep, there are a few, Carlie. You're in a groove, so I was letting you go.
Yep.
We've
Perfect.
got one. Can we include multiple dimensions in this expense sheet where they have include multiple dimension codes? I assume that's at the line level, which I assume the answer is yes, Carlie, but I'll let you answer that one. Would just work like a normal type of entry.
Yep, great question. Yep, you can add all dimensions, so 2 global and the 6 shortcut all here. I only have my department code, and then again, my projects code is another dimension. I actually hid the other ones as I wasn't using them before, but you do have availability to all of them.
Awesome. Lynn, if that doesn't answer the full question, or you have a different question, please let us know. But thank you, Carlie, for that one. And then Sue asked what license we need in order to enter these expense reports. Do we need a Teams license? Do we need an Essentials license? What is needed there, Carlie, to get these added in?
Yep, great question. And a team member's license will work. I just am going through a project now that recently went live, and many of their employees are on a team member license, and they are doing credit card expenses and personal. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlie. That's all we've got right now. Lynn asked, confirmed that answer answers the question, so we should be good there. And so Sue's got one more in terms of entering expenses on a mobile device. So I'll let you answer that one as well.
Yep, that has been tested as well. So you can use the Business Central app and access the expense sheet and enter and submit and approve through there.
Awesome. Can you approve with a Teams license?
Yes.
Cool.
Okay.
Lots of thumbs up. I'll let you get back to it, Carlie, but if everybody is still with us, give us a react up top just to make sure that everybody's still there, and we'll continue on forward. I just gave it a thumbs up. So if anybody else likes the content, please give us a reaction there and we'll continue forward.
Awesome. Okay. I see one other question, Sue. So are the approvals based on standard BC approval workflow? Yep, good question here. So the approvals are not. So if you go to your employee and I have my expense sheet approver, Ben. Okay, so again, if I have approvals turned on, it's going to go to Ben for mine. And then we do have a page here. Let me go to expenses to approve. So that is tailored to your expenses to approve, right? So, or my expenses to approve. So they will come to this list here where then I can open up the expense sheet from here and approve or reject it. And if I'm rejected, add a comment. So it does use a similar kind of routine, but we do have our own page. And you will get an email. So the email will be sent to the user setup, whatever email you have set up here. Okay, and that is for both the person sending the approval and then the person approving it and getting it back to the requester. All good questions. Really, the last thing I have to show here is just a few more things on how this is intertwined with our project management solution. And so if I come here to projects, this is using our project management solution, PMS, and all these expenses that we have been generating together, I've been tying to this project here. So how am I able to come to this project and see my expenses, right? So we added this page called expense journals. So if I open this up for this project, I can see any expense that has been tied to this project and also the status. So I can see all of these, we're waiting on our customer to pay us for these expenses. It shows that we have billed them. We're just waiting for them to pay it, okay? And then this one has not been billed. Okay, so that's how I'm able to see my project expenses. Another really great feature we added is create invoice with expenses. Okay, so if you're familiar with our project tool, it's really all based around like time and materials and recording time against our projects and then billing the customers for our time. So if you look over here, we have actual hours. So it shows there's been 19 hours. Now, again, this is using timesheets that have been billed for this project. However, 9 of them have not been billed. And so what this button here will do is it'll look at all outstanding time, but then also expenses for this project, and then create one invoice that has both the time and expenses to your customer. So that's a really great feature. Instead of having to separately create an invoice for time, separately create an invoice for expenses, you can do it all together in one button. Now, if the customer requests that they get a separate invoice for time and expenses, you can just use the create invoice here, which will just generate an invoice for time, and then this one here for just expenses. Okay, so kind of works with both scenarios there. That is the full agenda here. Do we have any other questions in the chat here?
I'm just dropping in a few links, Carlie, before we get to our conclusion. So far I've done the 30-day free trial and the activation key walkthrough, which we'll get into back in the PowerPoint. But if there's any more questions, please ask them here while Carlie's still doing the live demo. We can go through a few more things since we do have time. I think we have 45 minutes scheduled, so we should be plenty good on time. But if not, we can jump into the conclusion and go from there. If you want to jump back to the PowerPoint, Carlie, I can take us home. Awesome. So what are the next steps? I have dropped a few links in the chat already. I'll drop a few more in when I'm not talking because I can't multitask there. But first thing is download that 30-day free trial. That's the first link that I put in there. That'll take you out to AppSource. That'll allow you to download it. The second video that I dropped in there is going to be how to actually activate the demo key. It's a simple click of a button once you've got it downloaded. Also make sure that the users have the correct permissions, which I'll link a video to. After that, you're ready to get up and running. That should take about 5 minutes end to end to download the trial, activate it, add a couple user permissions. Partners, if you've got this in your demos or you want to show it off to your clients, feel free to do so in your demo environment. And then users, of course, we'd recommend putting this in a sandbox environment to get started there. Again, have dropped the videos in there, so that will take care of the second piece. Carlie, if you want to go to the next slide, we will finish it out. So what else do we have in terms of resources to help you, not only for expense sheets, but for all 30 plus of our apps that we've got out on AppSource right now? We've got a product page and we've got all of our apps listed out on AppSource. What this is going to include is summaries, screenshots, as well as user and setup guides. So if you're a visual learner and you want to watch the video and listen to us talk, you can go through those. We also put all of our recordings like this on our YouTube channel and link them both to our website and AppSource. So you can always find that there. Or if you like to read it up on the screen or even print it out, we've got a user and setup guide that'll walk you through everything Carlie went through today in depth. It'll show you how to set it up. It'll show you kind of the walkthrough of what a user would do as well, whether they're doing the corporate expenses, the personal expenses, the reimbursements, the approvals, the projects, all that good stuff. We've also got a YouTube channel. So not just this app, but all of our apps, as well as other Business Central tutorials. Would highly recommend you check that out. Subscribe for the newest updates as well. And then finally, the product guide, which I'm going to drop in the chat here as well. If you stick around for 2 more minutes after I stop talking, I'll drop the rest of those links there. This is going to include a fit gap analysis for all 30 of our apps. So it's going to show what we had today, what's the current gap, how do we solve that, and then how long does it take to configure and train. I think expense sheets, Carlie, usually takes about 5 or 6 hours end to end. If you're doing everything and anything, if all you want is a couple expense categories and a couple users in there, it can be much quicker. So we like to think that most of our apps you can get up and running very quickly, part of our overall strategy and kind of what we do as a business. So if you've implemented any of our other products, you'll see the same here. And with that, I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to drop a few more of these links. If there's any more questions, please stick around. And for those of you who have stuck with us to the end, we really appreciate it. I also want to let everybody know we have a new health check app that's come out. It's our first free app, and it's going to be similar to some of the other dashboards that you've seen. So if you or any of your clients are looking to do a health check on their Business Central instance, please feel free to also download our health check app, and feel free to reach out to anybody on our team if you're looking for some additional help with that health check. So again, appreciate everybody coming out today. Carlie, thanks for the excellent live demo, and I'll drop a few more links in here as we go, but we'll see you next time on another Toolbox Tuesday. Thanks again for joining.